Good evening. My name is Barkha Dutt, and you're watching the Mojo Story, our independent digital platform. Just when it looked like it could not get any worse for the Congress after its declining performance in Bihar and another state that's gone to the NDA, Barack Obama seems to have added insult to injury, at least as far as Rahul Gandhi is concerned. In his soon-to-be-released political memoirs, Obama has done a brutal takedown of Rahul Gandhi, causing much mirth within the ruling party, but also raising a compelling question. Is it time for Rahul Gandhi to confront the fact that he is not an effective politician? And that might be quite the understatement of the year 2020. Let me introduce our panel. To discuss exactly this question, Obama's takedown of Rahul Gandhi. Now, of course, Rahul Gandhi is not the only political leader that Barack Obama has been scathing about. There are many others who find less than complimentary mentions, Vladimir Putin and Nicolas Sarkozy among them. But from an Indian context, obviously, this is created a very, very interesting political debate. Joining us on the program, Veer Sanghvi, editor, columnist, and a television host. Thank you, Veer, and welcome to the program. Dilip Cherian, I think, who knows everything about branding and positioning and imaging, is with us as well. Kaveri Bamzai, one of my favorite columnists, is with us as well. And Shahid Siddiqui, who did actually a passionate defense of Rahul Gandhi being the great liberal hope on Twitter just today. So it's a really interesting panel, and I'm looking forward to this conversation as well as taking questions from our audience on this live stream. Now, for anyone who may have missed it, this is pretty much what Barack Obama said, describing his meetings with I was going to say the Congress president, but there's so much confusion over who actually leads the Congress. Describing his meeting with the Congress leader, he said that Mr. Gandhi was like an eager student, but one who could not master the subject, who lacked both passion and aptitude, and he had a certain nervous, unformed quality about him. For anyone who's engaged with Rahul Gandhi, he's shifty, he doesn't make eye contact. That last line was quite brilliantly captured, nervous, unformed quality. So let me get straight to the conversation, and I'll start with you, Ved, because I want to couple it with something you wrote about the Bihar elections. You said that the Congress was like that annoying elderly relative who crashed the party, had too much booze, and then refused to leave. Now, if you couple that with what's been said about Rahul, it's really not a good day for the Congress, is it? But how embarrassed should Rahul be?
I think he should be more embarrassed by Bihar than he should be by anything Obama says. I think from Rahul's perspective, Obama is the man who took Mr. Modi, gave him all kinds of international legitimacy, introduced him to the world stage, forgot what the US administration had said about him in the years that went by. So I'm pretty sure Rahul would have quite a lot to say about Obama. So I wouldn't pay that much attention to that. In terms of the Congress in Bihar and the Congress in all the assembly elections, it's a huge, huge embarrassment. I think even more worrying for the Congress in Bihar is Madhya Pradesh. Jyotiraditya Scindia left, took his MLAs with him, brought down the government, and managed to get most of his MLAs re-elected. So what does this say for the Congress? That any leader who feels dissatisfied can go out, take MLAs, and they'll win elections because people are not really so loyal to the Congress that they won't vote for somebody who's defected. That signal is devastating. When you have a combination of poor electoral performance, huge internal dissent, and a sense that the voters don't really care about the Congress tag any longer, then the party is in trouble.
You mentioned that he should be more worried about the Bihar result, Veer, than actually worrying about what Obama may say about him. But in some ways, the reason that Obama's words about Rahul Gandhi have actually struck such a chord is because how true they seem to be to so many people who've actually interacted with him. Now, notice one of the things that the Congress has done since this Bihar result is to actually attack Asad Owaisi, who's hit back with, again, less than flattering comments about Rahul Gandhi, including pointing out that he took a holiday in the middle of the Bihar campaign. So do you really think that Obama's words are irrelevant? Strictly speaking, Obama's a retired president. They have no political bearing, right? But speaking in terms of perception and narrative, and coupled with the Bihar result, do they not add insults to injury?
Well, in a sense, Barkha, they confirm what we already know. He said he had a nervous, unformed quality to him. which I think is a fair description. It said that he lacked the passion and the aptitude. I think that's a fair description. I don't think Rahul Gandhi has fire in his belly. I don't think he's a natural politician. And I think there was a reference to his being like a student trying to impress the teacher. Again, that's not very odd. I know one famous television anchor who said of Rahul Gandhi in the early years of his career that he was like a graduate student who went to meet people, took notes about what they said, and then came and lectured other people. So everything Obama has said has been said before.
Okay, Shahid, what caused you today to go online and actually defend Rahul Gandhi? Why today? Did you take umbrage as well at what Obama said? And at one level, I see the point. It's not as if the Prime Minister has always been praised by the Americans. Certainly, he was denied a visa for 10 years. You've had Time magazine put him on the cover and call him divider in chief. There has been Western criticism of Narendra Modi as well. But perhaps had that criticism today been of Modi instead of Rahul, liberals like yourself would have been jumping all over it and using it to reinforce your own position.
No, Barkha, I had tweeted much before I saw the reaction of President Obama. But I don't know how many times President Obama met Rahul Gandhi, how long did he meet him to form an impression, because he has been meeting Prime Minister Modi much more. He met him much more. He had much more interaction, and I don't see how he has described Prime Minister Modi. That should have been the story, but I don't see that the story. So what I feel is that, and I've been a critic of Rahul Gandhi for long, but what impresses me now is that Rahul Gandhi, despite all the defeats, despite all the setbacks, he has stood his ground and he has not changed his ideological position. When even Aam Aadmi Party is taking a different line today, others are jumping on to soft Hinduism, but Rahul has not done that. Rahul is taking an ideological position. That has impressed me, because I thought that he was not a very serious person. But if he is not a serious person, then he would have run away long time back. He had every reason to move out of politics, or move away from politics, or move away from Congress, but that he has not done. So that is one reason. And the second is that Obama has been critical openly of Prime Minister Modi's politics and policies, and the line he has been taking, but nobody really talks about that. But they have jumped onto just one or two sentences about Rahul Gandhi. So Rahul Gandhi is the favorite punching bag of the liberals, of the right, of the left, and everybody, and that's make him an underdog, and that's why a person like me stands up for him today. Because I have hardly met him. I have met him only once, but I hardly know him as a person.
Let me ask you this. When you have met him, do you feel that he has a nervous, unformed quality about him?
When I met him, it was with the Singapore President Lee Kuan Yew, and he was listening to him intently. That was a long time back. And let me also say that Rahul Gandhi has changed in last 5, 6, 7 years. He has changed a lot, and everybody can see that. So when President Obama met him, maybe he was much more nervous, but he seems to be much more confident now. The way he speaks, the way he interacts with the media, the way he takes on the press conferences, the way he talks about economy and other issues. So to treat him as permanently as a pappu, the impression which was being created by the media and by the opposition at that time, and I had agreed with that at that point of time. But now what I see is a different Rahul Gandhi, who has matured, and he is maturing. And I don't see any other leader who can take on to BJP or Modi in the country today. And Congress cannot do without him. And one more point I want to make is that it is the Congress High Command which is at fault in Bihar or UP. They do not try to organize the party at the grassroots level. They are the people who pressurize Rahul Gandhi and others to go for more seats, ask for more seats, more than they can chew. They don't have candidates, but still they pressurize him to ask for much more, which to my knowledge, and I've been speaking to a lot of senior Congress leaders, it is not Rahul Gandhi who demands more seats. It is the local leaders who demand it and pressurize Rahul Gandhi to do that. And that's where I think things go wrong. So Rahul Gandhi should make a clean break from the past and try to reorganize the party now. That is
Okay.
only way to
Okay,
revive the
you're
party.
making a lot of,
Getting away.
you've clapped a lot of different points. Firstly, you've said he's the only one who can take on Narendra Modi, and actually, we don't see any evidence right now of that at all. In fact, we see quite the opposite sort of evidence. Let me just bring in Veer for a moment before I go to Dilip and Kaveri, because Veer, one of the comments that's come on our live stream is now, are you guys going to call Obama a Sanghi? Is Obama going to be called a Bhakt for what he said? And I think it's a fair question. I think it works both ways, right? If Obama had said this about Narendra Modi, and we do not know what Obama is going to say about Mr. Modi because book two is yet to come. He's done a two-part memoirs, and it seems to be once again child. But the fact that people are saying now, are you going to call Obama Sanghi? How do you see that comment?
I see it's a very stupid comment, frankly. Nobody is talking about Obama's political views. All we are saying is that Obama has given an opinion of Rahul Gandhi, which is not very different from what most of us feel. Does that necessarily make him a Sanghi? Does it even suggest that he's a Sanghi? We've also said that Obama was the person who, after a period when Mr. Narendra Modi was in the international wilderness, gave him legitimacy, reintroduced him to the world community. He even appeared in Monkey Bath and did all of that. So I think Obama clearly felt a chemistry with Narendra Modi. And while you're right, none of us has read the book, and we're only relying on a single review, fawning review in the New York Times, we don't really know what he said about Narendra Modi in the first volume, let alone in the second volume that will come. But I think there is no doubt that many people who are unhappy with Narendra Modi, including perhaps Rahul Gandhi, were not pleased with the way in which Obama reacted to Narendra Modi. That doesn't make Narendra Modi a good person or a bad person. It certainly doesn't make Obama a Sanghi. It just makes him an American president acting in the best interest of his country, which is what his job is.
Okay, and of course he can also speak much more freely now because that's what it's all about. But let's just
Yeah.
take a look at exactly the full statement of what Obama said about Rahul. A nervous, unformed quality about him, as if he were a student who'd done the coursework and he was eager to impress the teacher, but deep down lacked either the aptitude or the passion to master the subject. It's quite a detailed comment. There are also comments about Dr. Manmohan Singh and so on. But Dilip, let me just get you for first thoughts on what you feel about what's been said and whether it even matters. Now, you know what? It may have just been one day's story, but guess what the Congress or some of the Congress people decide to do in the meantime? You have people like Manikam Tagore saying that he's decided to unfollow Barack Obama, right? But unfollow, like Obama cares, like this is going to make some gigantic difference to Obama that Manikam Tagore, member of parliament of the Congress party, has decided to unfollow him, drawing further attention to a story that may have been one day's headline, right? It's one day's news. I think we've all learned that about the social media cycle. So Dilip, go ahead.
There are 2 points to note here, and which probably Rahul Gandhi can take some comfort from. One is a comment that came up while Bihar was on, and perhaps in the gap while Rahul himself was not campaigning in Bihar, which was by a social media commentator who said Rahul has to decide whether he wants to be a person or a politician. So, and I think that in some senses, what he needs to take comfort from is that there has been a great effort starting from about 6 p.m. yesterday to dress this Obama comment in various kinds of formats, and I have received it in at least 4 formats during the course of last evening to this afternoon. So clearly, there is a campaign to make sure that this is highly visible, besides the antics of the likes of Manikam Tagore.
Mhm.
So that's one thing. The second thing is that where Obama's comments are correct, and in the interactions that a lot of people have had with him, is in the fact that there is this eager beaver approach of his, and to some extent, Obama is responding like the professor that he's gone to being again. So, you know, the fact that during the phase that Obama met him, he had this I want to be in action, learning rather than giving out my opinion was correct during that phase. But I think those who have observed him in the last couple of years have seen a huge difference in the way he's tackling his job and the kind of remarks and analysis which he's today delivering all the time. So I think there's a big difference between Rahul, whatever, 3.0 at that time and 5.0 now. So I think he needs to observe what Obama has said, but he certainly need not worry too much about it. As you said, it is like everything else on social media, a 1 or 2 day story.
I just want to, before I come to Kaveri, go back to Veer briefly, because that brilliant sort of delicious metaphor of the Congress is the old uncle who drinks too much booze and then gets drunk and refuses to leave the party. If the Congress is in that state today, in the state where prohibition, by the way, had been imposed by Nitish Kumar, to continue that metaphor, whose fault is that? Whose fault is that? Like, at what point do we hold the Gandhis responsible for the state of the Congress?
I don't think you can not, sorry, hold the Gandhis responsible. Between mother and son, they've run the Congress for what, 15, 20 years? So yes, they are responsible. You can argue in Rahul Gandhi's defense that the failure of his first election when Mr. Modi came to power was a commentary on the failures of UPA 2 and not on Rahul himself. But the second election, where the Congress did as badly, was entirely Rahul's fault. He's had, what, 6, 7 years to try and, probably more, to try and rebuild the party in Bihar. If this is the best they've got to, that's a problem. I think one of the problems at this election was Mr. Modi is, of course, a phenomenon by himself, and he has his own popularity. But Nitish's USP always was, look, I'm not Lalu. Now there's a new generation that doesn't remember Lalu and that doesn't remember Jungle Raj. So Nitish is in trouble. Tejasvi, on the other hand, also now doesn't have to carry the baggage of Lalu, has been able to revive and rejuvenate his party, almost come to power. Rahul has not done that. When you see Rahul, you people, voters, heap all the injustices of the past, all the corruption of UPA2, all the mistakes that they made, and they put them on his shoulder. At some stage, Rahul should have made a break, should have said, I'm in this for myself. He hasn't. And it's not clear now why he's in it.
Yeah, well, it's not also as if he's ready to make way for someone else to come, right? And that is the problem. To neither take full charge nor make way for someone else. But let's return to the Obama comments and bring in Kaveri. And Kaveri, there was also, I think Veer makes the important point that this book, anything that we know about it is basically through what the Times wrote about it and through other excerpts in international media. It's not even released yet. It only releases next week. It's a 2-part memoir. We don't actually know what he might say about the Prime Minister. The same right-wing supporters who are celebrating this today might be extremely agitated tomorrow. But guess what? There is this that is also said about Dr. Manmohan Singh, who was mocked so much here at home, especially in his second term. There's a short phrase that we know: impassive integrity. Google, by the way, tells you that a number of Indians were looking up the meaning of impassive today. So I think Obama's really kept a lot of people quite busy. If you had to juxtapose Obama's comment on Manmohan Singh, we believe he called Sonia Gandhi beautiful. So in totally sexist, sort of classic sexist way, the only thing we know in terms of what he said about a woman are her looks. We know about the impassive integrity of Dr. Manmohan Singh, and we know what he said about Rahul. How do you see this?
In fact, I was just about to come to the point which you just made, that all he could think of Sonia Gandhi, considered at that point to be the most powerful woman, and who ran the country and the Congress, as we know, for over 10 years. The only thing that he could think of her was her beauty. Says a lot about.
We don't know, because we've only read the New York Times.
Exactly.
We don't know what he actually thinks.
Exactly. So, but I think to the point that has been made about Rahul Gandhi, we've heard so much about the right wing calling him Pappu that I'm surprised that they're so excited by what Obama has said, because this is exactly what they have been saying about him all this while. And to the point that Dilip made about Rahul 3.0 or Rahul 5.0, that's precisely the problem with Rahul. He's undergone so many versions. He's like a badly designed iPhone that never works. How many versions does he get to have till he gets to become perfect? And how much leeway will we give?
I just have to pause you there and ask you, which is your favorite iPhone model?
None. I don't use an iPhone. I'm an Android person. So I can tell you that I can tell you that whole idea that this is Rahul 3.0, Rahul 5.0, you really, no other political leader in India has been given so many chances, has been given so many opportunities. And I think that is what is irritating about him. And that is what is irritating about the Congress party currently, that despite all this, the liberal push for Rahul to become something, he refuses to own up to that idea of who he has to be. Even his father, I mean, his father became prime minister at 40, 41. Everyone called it a Babalo government. Everyone laughed at him, called him a Doon school boy and nothing more. But he grew into that job and he took that, he took the responsibility when it was given to him. And, Rahul is 50 years old. He's not ever had a full-time job, to my knowledge, like Modi, of course, who's never run a family. He's not had a family per se. The whole idea of raising kids. And,
Why does that matter?
it
Why do we
doesn't
care?
matter so much, Barkha, but at least you have a sense of what reality is. I'm saying that Rahul has all his life, unfortunately, because of the circumstances of his birth and the terrible assassinations that he's seen. And nobody can say that he's had a very good life in the sense that he's seen terrible tragedy. He's been living in a bubble all his life. And that bubble boy has to break out of that bubble at some point. And he has to confront what reality is. And no amount of discoveries of India, whether he does it by train or whether he does it by air or whether he does it by foot, can actually bring him to that until he realizes that power is where his future is. And that whole idea that he has, if you remember that power is poison, I think that is so deeply ingrained in him that he cannot actually begin to have that sense of responsibility.
I actually don't mind his embrace of the idea that power is poison if he were to then abdicate that power, but he doesn't do that,
But
and that is
yeah,
in
he
fact the
doesn't even
problem.
do that. Yeah.
Yeah, so Shahid, let's go back to your great belief. And you said that you tweeted what you did before you actually read what Obama had said and not as a response. Now, what gives you to believe? What gives you to believe that Mr. Gandhi is the best hope to take on Mr. Modi when the Bihar result tells you quite differently? When the Congress, in a peevish, sore loser type way, has attacked an Asad Owaisi for taking 5 seats there, called him a vote cutter, which the data doesn't bear out, because of the 20 seats that Owaisi contested, 6 were taken by the NDA and 9 were taken by the RJD, right, of the 20 seats he contested. So the vote cutter, even data-wise, doesn't apply. And it gives Owaisi the chance to say that, look, you used to think Muslims were your captive vote. Even Muslims don't want to vote for you anymore. And you're sitting here saying Rahul is the best bet to take on Modi. Why? What's your basis to say that?
No, Barkha, these are two different issues. What OIC has done, we can discuss it some other time. But let's talk about Bihar. You see, it was the liberals, it was the media which was expecting Congress to do very well in Bihar or in UP. I know for a fact because I was in Congress for nearly 10 years. I was the chairman of the Congress Minority Cell, and I have been speaking to Congress leaders in Bihar. Congress didn't have much of a chance. On ground, Congress does not exist. Post Narasimha Rao, Narasimha Rao systematically destroyed Congress at the grassroots level in Uttar Pradesh, in Bihar, in most of North India. And post that, organization has not been able to rebuild itself. And for that, I hold Sonia Gandhi equally responsible for, because she did not try to rebuild the Congress at the grassroots level. And Rahul again is responsible for not allowing the frontal organizations to come up, because it is the frontal organizations which can rebuild the Congress. They have to rebuild from the grassroots. They cannot expect suddenly to enter Bihar politics and win a lot of seats. They can't on the shoulders of Tejasvi or shoulders of Lalu Yadav. They can't. Even in UP we saw that they could not do it because they don't even have good candidates. They don't have. I have contested on Congress ticket and I have seen at the grassroots they don't have जिसको कहते हैं बस्ता पकड़ने वाला in your polling booth. You don't have 2 workers at your polling booth. You are like an orphan. trying to get your voters to the polling booth. That is the problem with Congress. Congress has lost its grassroots for a long, long time. They may have formed the government
And
in
yet,
2004 or 2009, but
yet you went on record to
yes,
say that he's the best
because I don't see anyone else.
history.
Barkha, I don't see anyone else. I don't see people taking a strong ideological position except him. I don't see any other leader. They are regional leaders. Whether it's Tejasvi, or it is a Mamta, or anyone else. I don't see a leader in the country, and Congress has to rebuild. And the tragedy of the Congress is that it cannot rebuild without a Nehru Gandhi leader. It has become a party of sycophants, of manipulators for quite some time. And Rahul Gandhi has to get rid of these people to get the youth wants to come back, and taking a very clear line for the future of the country that Rahul Gandhi can do. I still believe that, because I don't see any other
Okay.
alternative. Maybe something emerges in the coming future, but not at the moment. We are talking of the moment.
Let's come back. Let's come back to Obama, and I'll come back to Veer first, and then Dilip. Here's the thing. I remember that time when Obama was in India. Mr. Modi was the prime minister, and on his last day, he spoke about how the Indian Constitution sort of reinforced pluralism, and that was a message that Indians needed to remember. And then, while everybody said "Hurrah, yay," he went from here to Saudi Arabia, right? And suddenly, that intervention seemed absolutely hypocritical, because he was not going to go and make the same comments in Saudi Arabia. What I'm really getting at is that while this is a kind of little delicious story for politicians and journalists for one day, should it matter to us what the Americans say? Because there have been comments, friends of mine have tweeted today saying, if even Obama thinks you're a failure as a politician, you are a failure as a politician. Yes, Obama has a great turn of phrase. I'm sure there's an eloquence in it that is actually kind of compelling for people like us. But beyond that, should we care what the Americans say either about Rahul or about Modi? Sorry, Shahid, you wanted to get a line in and then read?
Very small comment.
Yeah.
You read the memoirs of Kissinger. You read what Nixon and they said about Indira Gandhi, about India, and if you believe what they said, and if you agree with that, then there's nothing more to say. So these leaders, don't take them very seriously. Yes.
I'm just making the point to read that we live in such stupid times that when Time magazine called Mr. Modi one of the 100 most powerful people of the year, everybody said yay, who likes Mr. Modi. And then when the Shaheen Bagh women were also in the same list, suddenly it wasn't that comfortable. So I kind of feel that Obama's takedown of Indian politics is a little bit like that. You cherry pick what suits your political beliefs that you already hold. It's just confirmation bias.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about what Shahid gave the example of Nixon and Indira Gandhi. I was actually going to give the same example. I don't really think it matters very much what a foreign politician who comes in, has a brief meeting with you, and then goes back and writes in his book matters. I think as Indians, we respond too easily to what foreigners say about us. One article appears in the New York Times, and suddenly we say it's a rag. Your column appears in the Washington Post, and we say it's a conspiracy to defame India. I think people have all kinds of views. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. Every time we attach a disproportionate importance to something that is said in the West, we show our lack of confidence, our unformed, nervous lack of confidence as a nation. I think Obama is entitled to his views, but on this subject, he is no expert.
Kaveri, sorry, Dilip, I didn't mean to come to you, but since Kaveri brought up this example about the ever-changing iPhone models, and so you've even forgotten what the classic iPhone used to be like, right? Everyone lost track of which one actually works and so on. Do you agree with that? Because the timing is a bit embarrassing. I can argue this from both ways because there are shades of truth on both sides. The timing, you look at Bihar, the Congress slips, almost 10 seats. There's that sense of Rahul Gandhi being on holiday to his sister's house in Himachal Pradesh in the middle of a Bihar election. There is an unrest within the party. There's the left allies of the Congress saying, why did you give them 70 seats? Their strike rate is terrible. And it's the timing. I mean, maybe they had this come in the middle of the year, you would have still had that chance or that anticipation that the Mahagathbandhan could have taken Bihar. Maybe it would have been seen differently. Now it just looks like the description of a political failure.
But Rahul Gandhi's timing has never been right. I mean, when has it ever been right? The But the point here again I want to make is that, between what is popularly known as a pappu, as he's known, and the other person who's known as a feku, I would actually rather take a pappu than a feku. Someone whose views are still unformed and there's potential to learn, compared to someone who knows it all and thinks he knows it all. I would rather take someone who still thinks that there is potential to learn. So I think that is another part of this whole story, that you have two politicians who are so distinct in style. You have a prime minister who thinks he knows it all, who thinks he's done it all, who's been there, done that, and you have a leader of the opposition who seems so unformed and who seems so unsure and who seems so unclear about where he's going. I think that contrast is what makes this a sharper divide. And I think between the two, if it were left to me as a voter, I would still choose someone who has potential to learn rather than someone who thinks he knows it all. So that, I think, is my view.
But many Indians are not voting like you.
Exactly.
Most Indians are not voting like you.
Most Indians don't want to go there. Also, remember, I gave you the example of Rajiv Gandhi earlier. When he came to power again, there was this whole idea that he doesn't know enough, and this is going to be a government run by Doon school boys. And for 2 years it seemed that it was not, and then of course it all came crashing down. But I think Rahul Gandhi's problem has been that, as I said, he's never actually held a position of responsibility. The only position of responsibility he's held is within the Congress party, which is really like running your own kitchen or your own household, in the Prime Minister's house or something. He has to have had an opportunity where he has run, where he's actually held a public office, which he's never done. And I think that is his greatest failing and will remain his greatest failing.
But let's take a little bit of time to also look at how Obama is talking about others in India, others in the world, right? This is obviously his bestseller book. He cannot be politically correct in it, because who's going to bother to read that book, right? So, for example, there is a Putin who gets, there's Sarkozy first, whose chest thrust out like a bantam cock's.
Which is actually quite accurate, Barkha.
Yeah, so but see, like, because we have some emotional distance from Sarkozy and France, we can laugh at that. There's Putin, physically unremarkable and power hungry. I think the physically unremarkable will hurt Putin more than the power hungry, given what an alpha male thinks he is. And then, of course, there is Manmohan Singh, closer home, described to have impassive integrity. Now, the point I'm trying to make, Dilip, really is that Obama obviously hasn't spared many people. It isn't just Rahul, right? But the world loves a winner and hates a loser. And the problem with this is that none of this would matter if Mr. Gandhi were better at winning elections. None of this would matter. He could afford the sort of what some would call brazen, some would call nonchalant, attitude that sometimes comes from the BJP to criticism, because they keep winning elections.
The BJP, to stay on that point, wins elections because its leaders stay on the job 24/7, 365 days a year. That is one of the components of their success. We may argue with their beliefs, we may argue with their methods, but you cannot fault them on the kind of efforts that they make. So the part of the criticism of Rahul Gandhi comes from that place, that he is in a professorial way, if one looks at it, he's not performing to potential. So, even if he's looking after the kitchen cabinet, as Kaveri was about to put it, he has to be able to be seen there on a consistent basis without flinching because the heat's got too much in the stove. So, that is, I think, the most striking thing about him as far as the Indian public is concerned. As far as his party is concerned, that is what is causing all the chaos and the pushback that currently exists within the party. So when you have a party which is already failing at the hustings and then is now looking more fractured than it has ever looked before, then you're really dealing with a person who any criticism from the outside, especially if it is wonderfully worded as Obama has, and Obama has chosen his phrases very, very carefully, and clearly he's also, like Rahul Gandhi, kept notes after each meeting to be able to, regurgitate this, as it were, and to put it together in a manner which makes for a bestseller. So there's no doubt that failure has has added a additional halo around Obama's searing comments. But in addition, I think that some of it hurts because the facts today seem to fit in to what Obama has described.
And I think that's the point, right? When you say that the Bihar verdict matters more than what Obama says, the point is if the Bihar verdict had gone otherwise, let's imagine for a moment that it was the Mahagathbandhan, even with the Congress playing junior partner, these words would not have had the kind of resonance that they're having 2 days after the Bihar result.
Yeah, but I think you used the phrase confirmation bias. I think there is an element of that. The reason people are quoting Obama so approvingly is because he said what many people were already thinking anyhow, that Rahul is neither. I don't think that this is about being an eager student wanting to impress the teacher matters so much, but the stuff about he is lacking the aptitude or the passion is something that will touch a chord, because that is something people have always said about Rahul, that he doesn't have the passion, he isn't dedicated to the job, he goes off, takes holidays, doesn't seem to take it as seriously as it should, he's not a natural politician. I think these are things that have been said very often about Rahul, and to hear Obama saying it and to have it quoted in the New York Times, which is a big deal for Indians, seems to me to be popular with the intelligentsia at least, because it confirms what you already believe.
But can you expand on your theory of the Congress's drunk Uncle G?
Sure. I think the Congress has this view, and it's a view that shows you in a way how delusional the Congress is. You speak to any Congress person, they will say, we are the only national party, we are the national opposition, we are the natural opposition. Every time there's any kind of alliance, we must be a part of it. We must get a disproportionate share of importance in that alliance. And I was saying the same thing in Tamil Nadu with the DMK. And that anybody who does not join our alliance, as in the case of Owaisi, is therefore an enemy of secularism, an enemy of liberalism. This may well have been true of the Congress at one stage, but like some uncle who may have been a war hero in his youth, it's now sort of a drunken old party leaning on past glories, refusing to accept that times have changed, forcing itself on others who are eager to get ahead and spoiling the party.
And how does one deal with these Uncle Gs, just to stay with the metaphor? I think Kaveri is wanting to come in there.
Next line, apart from the lines you quoted.
Yeah.
No, I was just wondering that isn't he more like the Betaji who hasn't had his first drink actually? Rahul is more like the Betaji or the Bhatija who's not had his first drink, and the Uncle Ji is sort of bringing him in and saying, this is your moment. Now is the time you should have your first drink. And Betaji refuses because Betaji doesn't want to own up to anything. He doesn't want any responsibility. Betaji doesn't even want to drink, whether it's poison or anything else. That's the problem with Betaji. It's not Uncle Ji, it's Betaji.
I let Veer respond to that because it was his metaphor.
Yeah, no, my metaphor was for the Congress party. It wasn't for Rahul personally. But the next line, apart from the ones you quoted, was that there comes a stage when even the politest host tells the uncle that he's had enough and it's time to go home. I think something like that is going to happen to the Congress. On Kaveri's point about the Betaji and the Uncle G, yes, I think the problem with Rahul is that he's not even a Betaji. If you look at Tejasvi, one reason why he was able to do well, apart from the youth factor and people forgetting what Lalu's rule had really been like, is because he said, my father stood for social justice. I'm not fighting that battle. I'm fighting a battle of economic justice. He redefined what his party was about. Every time you hear Rahul talk, he talks about centuries of Congress. He talks about how his grandmother split Pakistan, what the Congress has done, what the Congress tradition has been. So this is a man who is not keen to make a new start. This is a man who's brought the excess baggage of many generations along with him.
Shahid, you were wanted to come in, and to Veer's point, which is an interesting point, Tejasvi's posters, for example, in Bihar, got rid of his father. Like,
Yeah.
you can't even imagine Rahul and Priyanka
Yes.
not referencing their family. They reference their family all the time. When you look at Tejasvi's posters, he was absolutely unapologetic about the fact that his father represented a kind of baggage that he did not want to be associated with. And Priyanka even today will say, I am Indira's granddaughter. Rahul will reference the Congress, his family all the time, not realizing that that is no longer a political virtue necessarily.
That's exactly what I have been saying. That he will have to make a complete break from the past, and for that, I mean, Lalu was in prison. If Lalu was out, Tejasvi would have been able to, make a break from Rahul. So how sorry, break from Lalu. So how does Rahul make a break from Sonia Gandhi? So Sonia Gandhi has to really retire. She has to move out of politics totally till she remains, and the people who have been very close to her remains. Then Rahul Gandhi won't be able to make his mark. Rahul Gandhi won't be able to make a break, and that's exactly what's happening in the Congress party. That the Uncle G's demand much more, as we said. These Uncle G's crash into a party, demands, have a lot of drinks, and start talking of the past and all their great achievements. And that's what is happening with Rahul Gandhi, with all these leaders, the so-called high command. This high command rides on the shoulders of Nehru Gandhi family. They don't do anything on the ground. This I have seen. I mean, they exploit the family much more. It's not just the family which has been exploiting them. From in Nehru and Indira Gandhi onwards, most of the Congress leaders have been riding on the shoulders of this family to come into power, to get the votes. And now, since they are not able to get the votes from them, they have not been able to work on the ground and re-energize the party. So, and there is a younger India which is looking out towards Congress. So Congress has to revive itself. I don't know how it will be revived. If it cannot be revived with Rahul Gandhi, then with whom? That is the question, and we have to find the answer to that, because I don't see OSCE be able to, to unite Muslims all over the country and become an alternative to Modi. OSCE may have done well. I'm not criticizing OSCE. I'm not questioning OSCE, but OSCE in a way helps Modi and BJP much more by his speeches. By showing the face of OSCE, BJP is able to polarize the votes. It's not that he's a vote cutter. His face, his speeches, his style of politics allows BJP to polarize the Hindu vote, the upper caste and the other votes. And that is where OSCE becomes a bit
But it is not.
difficult.
But it is not. It is not Ovaisy's job to help the Congress. That's not
No,
Ovaisy's job.
I'm not saying it is his job. But if we find that somebody, politics is not job of OSCE or anybody to help the Congress, but if I find that OSCE or a Muslim League is not helping the country remain secular or move in the way I believe it should move, then I will oppose a Muslim League. It's not the job of a Muslim League to help Indian Constitution to remain intact or remain secular. But it is my job to question Muslim League or to question OSCE.
But I do feel that there is something in the Bihar response to Asad Owaisi that reflects that a change in how Muslims are also looking at their
Muslims
options.
have lost faith in the so-called secular parties. These
Exactly.
secular parties are family parties. They are casteist parties, and they do not really bother about Muslims once they come to power. I've seen all these parties. They just use play on the emotions of Muslims, get their votes, but once they are in power, they are as bad as any other party. That is the reason that on the socio-economic educational front, Muslims have gone from bad to worse. Look at Bengal. Despite the left for 37 years, condition of Muslims in Bengal, 26% of the population, but in the jobs they have not been more than 3-4% in these 37 years. So who's responsible? You can't go on holding Muslims responsible for their backwardness.
You're the one who's still saying Rahul's the only option we have. Now we've got about 10 minutes. Let's spend it on what this result means
I'm
for
saying
the Congress.
Congress has that. Congress doesn't have another option.
So that was going to be my question.
In the country, I don't see another party emerging right now.
Got it. That's what I want to spend the next 10 minutes on. Is Rahul Gandhi and his sister and his mother now a liability for the Congress? Dilip, we saw that group of 23, as it's called, kind of trying, making some feeble attempt to take the family on and then having to backtrack, be punished, for it in various ways. Do you believe the Bihar verdict has set the context for a kind of revived mutiny within the family? How far would this unrest, which is there, possibly go?
What Bihar has done is, in a sense, reinforce what the group of 23 have been talking about, which is that the only way to revive the Congress is to allow that X, and we don't know who the X is. Nobody is going to define who the X is. Somebody with enough fire in the belly and acceptability with enough people in the Congress, hopefully more of the young, to come through by a process of natural, free, and fair elections. Now, if Rahul Gandhi has said he does not want to be president, and nobody with the Gandhi family should be, then if that is the case, then what Shahid is saying and what aged uncle metaphor works is allow someone who actually comes in there, says, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be working towards it, and enough people are behind me. So I think Bihar has thrown up the possibility that that is the only solution yet again, because what there is no doubt that the party has grown into a sense of uh, failed self entitlement. It's proving time and time again that what it thinks it is entitled to, it certainly is not. And as a party, it is marginalized itself in state after state. I hope that Tamil Nadu is not yet another example where it destroys the chance of an opposition party to stand its ground and win elections. Because if it does, then it is further proof that even the other opposition parties are unable
Got it.
to just get the courage to say,
And,
hey, lump these guys and dump them now, because that's what the party actually is also saying about itself, saying that, look, we need to recognize we are in a dump and we need to come out of it with a fair and free election.
but the point is exactly that these words from Obama, the timing of it seems to be almost uncanny. There's a kind of uncanny quality to
I
it. And I
wouldn't
think
say,
that's
yeah.
why they're getting the kind of attention they are. It's like 2 days after the Bihar defeat, it's like delivering for the BJP. It's almost like that.
But we
Sorry,
have to wait for the book.
sorry,
I said we have
Dilip.
to wait. We have to wait for what the book actually says about everybody else. Yeah.
Sure. That is, I think, we've already said, will the sequel mention Obama's
Yeah.
appraisal of Modi? It would be interesting to see. And the same people right now who are like all guns blazing for Obama might have a different view. We don't actually know, because Obama has been quite sort of, for example, complimentary about Manmohan Singh. I think in passive integrity is a damn clever phrase. It's actually more clever even than what he said about Rahul. But Veer, the liability factor, the Gandhis as liability, do you think that when you see these kind of sycophantic tweets that we're seeing on our screen from Manikam Tagore, let's unfollow Obama, it's basically the Congress becoming like the BJP. The Congress's social media strategy more and more is becoming like the BJP, which is blind loyalty. Anyone who doesn't agree with you is somehow sold to the other side. Those kind of tropes that belong to the right wing, unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know if it's working for them, seem to now be embraced by the Congress.
Yeah, but we were talking about Obama and American presidents. One explanation for the reason why Richard Nixon was such a failure eventually, and was, I think, the first US president to be driven from office, was that he was a vice president in 1960. He lost the presidential election. He then lost governor of California in 1962. So by the time in 1968, when he very narrowly became US president, nearly anybody of quality, nearly anybody who had an option had left. So all the people around him were the chamchas, the sycophants, the garbage people, people who couldn't go anywhere else, people who thought they could manipulate him. And ultimately, they led him to the path of disaster. I think something like that is happening with the Congress. Anyone who could get out is getting out, or is at least trying to get out. As Rahul sees that happening, he's turning to a new lot of people. These are people who are not necessarily well known for anything other than their loyalty to Rahul Gandhi, which they wear on their sleeve and they exhibit it in the kind of tweets we've seen today and the kind of messages we've seen today, the questions we've seen today. So ultimately, you have Mr. Modi with this very, very loyal audience that deifies him and says he's a wonderful guy. And you have this sort of mini me, this little Rahul Gandhi trying to do the same thing. Not only does it not work, it makes him look ridiculous.
So, do you believe that there could be still some mutinous voices? Because you said anyone who can get out is getting out, right? Do you see the numbers now getting louder, Veer?
I have no inside information about that, so I cannot tell you with any kind of positivity, but it would seem to me that if I was a congressman and I was what, in early middle age, because there's nobody really young left in politics, and I was looking at a career in politics, I would say to myself, this train is not going anywhere. Do I really want to get off or do I want to stay on it? And the answer is quite obvious.
Yeah. Kaveri, look, we've got about 3-4 minutes left. I know everybody or some of you have 6 o'clock hard out. So, Kaveri, where do you see this going from here?
I see actually more and more congressmen doing exactly what Jyotiraditya Scindia did. I think you'll have more freelancers who will leave the Congress and who will try for a future in whatever party they can make difference in. And I think even more important than Bihar really was happened in Madhya Pradesh and the fact that Jyotiraditya did so well in the by-election. That will give a lot of support and it will give a lot of encouragement to anyone who's seeking a future outside the
Dilip, do you
Congress.
agree? Do you agree that there'll be more Scindias? Because we
I,
saw a kind
I,
of
I,
fumbling attempt by Sachin to do it. It didn't go all the way.
what the party is really needs to be scared about is people who can carry the vote with them when they go. So,
Exactly.
unfortunately, in the party today, what is proof of how they perform in state after state is that there are very few leaders, except for maybe the Gandhis to some extent and only to a tiny extent, who can actually carry the vote wherever they go and get people to come and listen to them. So without that plus X factor, there are few people who either the BJP will find acceptable and worthy of taking, because what do they bring to the party is the question that the RSS and the BJP will ask before they take any of these people, because they don't want any baggage. That certainly from the Congress is not of any advantage to the BJP.
Okay. Shahid and Veer, 30 seconds each. I'll give Shahid 30 seconds and Veer, you can wrap this up. Shahid, go ahead.
Barkha, I don't see a way out for Congress. And that's why the Congress has to revive itself with the family. Because without I was of the view that Rahul Gandhi and Sonia Gandhi should absolutely leave and someone else should emerge. But I don't see anyone else having that kind of all India image, because problem with Congress is that it's not a casteist party, it cannot be a communal party, it cannot be a regional party, and in this age of regionalism and casteism and communalism, they find it very difficult to have that ideological position. So they have to go back to the drawing board, come out with a future plan, and if they come with an ideological future plan, then whosoever the leader is, even Rahul Gandhi can deliver, but he has to have a new team with him. He can't do with the uncles who are already there, who have been riding on the shoulder of Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi, and who were not able to get more than 140, 180 seats, even in 2004 or 2009. So it's not that they could bring Congress a majority. Congress has lost majority, lost long time back at 240 Rao's time. Yeah.
Let me just jump in there and give the last word to Veer. I mean, obviously the uncle's metaphor has really stuck, but I have 2 points to say about Shahid's point about the Congress's ideological discomfort. It is an alliance with the Shiv Sena. Nobody is going to call the Shiv Sena a secular party, even if the Shiv Sena is trying to recast itself. 2, you have had Rahul Gandhi and the Congress flirt with a lighter version of Hindutva or Hinduism rather. You've had them try to mainline Hinduism into their brand of politics. You've had Randeep Surjewala talk about Rahul Gandhi wearing a caste thread, the Janayu. So it's not as if the Congress has not reflected its own ideological absence of moorings at this completely confusing time when they keep losing, right? If you had to advise the Congress party, would you ask them to get themselves a new leader?
Yes, I would, Barkha. I would actually just take Sonia and Rahul at their word. Sonia retired from politics. Anyone who knows her will tell you that she was quite content not being in the hurly-burly, moving away. Rahul has said repeatedly that he doesn't want anyone from his party, one from his family to lead the party, that he's happy being a worker of the Congress. So here's my question. What's the problem? Nobody's stopping you guys. Just go. I'm sure it will be a mess. I'm sure the Congress will have a huge amount of confusion before anything emerges. But is that so much worse than what's happening now?
And I think that's the question to leave everybody with. I can see everybody doing this while we was making that point. So everybody, but you know what, Reed, it's also incumbent on them. They don't do it. It's no point saying it if you're not going to do it, right?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think they should now not just say it, they should do it.
Okay, so let's, as they say, watch this space. Veer, Shahid, Dilip, Kaveri, and to our audience, thank you so much. What an interesting conversation. I think Obama made this sort of post-mortem of Bihar a little more interesting than it would have been. So we can say thank you to him for that. As journalists, we're always hungry for little nuggets of eloquence, and at least he gave us that. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you to our audience. See you tomorrow. No, tomorrow's Diwali, so happy Diwali. We're taking a break. We'll see you Monday. Thank you very much, and bye, everyone. Thank you.